there are only two types of women when you see Indonesian television, like ones that are funny and ones that are so pretty that she can only be seen as pretty. In places like Indonesia, where everything is constructed and everything is limited by, religion and, the government and culture itself, I think it's actually becoming more stated where women should be and what men should do. And even in roles in like modern relationships, in what I see in just relationships that are close to me with my friends who are expecting so much out of their boyfriends, expecting so much out of their girlfriends. And it's amazing for me to see, because growing up I wasn't really raised with such notion in mind. I guess because I'm an only child, and in addition to that, I'm an only grandchild and niece in my whole entire family. So I guess my family just wanted me to be, as tough as possible, as independent as possible, and they didn't actually say that those points were masculine in any way.
And when you say some of the expectations that you see in these other relationships around you and some of your friends, what are some of these expectations that you see?
Just socially, the girls are supposed to ask their boyfriends permission to go out when hanging out with friends, especially if there are male friends in their friendship circles. And also just the differences I see within my relationship with them is, in my relationship with my partner, we don't really have financial burdens for each other, like paying bills in restaurants and stuff. So when I go out with my partner and I pay the bills, it's such a shock for them. Like, how could you as a guy not treat your girlfriend? Just stuff like that. And then on top of that, sexually, of course, not pleasuring the guys, and without any regard for the woman's pleasure.
How do you see those expectations coming to fruition as well? Like, what kind of expectations are they put under?
Well, I mean, in Indonesia, it's more like, I think there are some who just actually avoid any relationships or any contact with the opposite gender, because they feel like it's such a tremendous pressure for them to act a certain way or behave a certain way, where they just suppress it all.
Do you see people trying to break out of these stereotypes?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk all day about how I used to be bullied in middle school and high school for being different, for being more of the, the soccer player. I wasn't the cheerleader, wearing like sneakers and not flats, because in my generation, at least in high school and middle school, the girls were dressed the same way, even though we were in uniforms, but they were all behaving the same way, with their long hair, and their skirts were shorter and everything like that. And I wasn't built for that. I couldn't fit in with that. And being that different just exploded a whole new, world of gossip. What's funny is, actually, I think since we are so influenced by like Americans and Asia, we tend to be a lot more mean girlish in our school with like seniority and stuff. So it was tough being different, and rumors like, she's a lesbian probably, or she's like, she doesn't, even though I was dating guys that they knew, there were guys in my class, but I had such short hair and I was captain of the soccer team. I ran sprints with like the boys. In PE, the girls weren't expected to do anything. That was my biggest concern. The girls only played with the girls, and when a girl is hanging out with the guys, they're always called like a slut, or she's doing every guy they see. And in class, I thought that wasn't gonna happen, but in PE, especially when our coach is a guy, a man, the girls just sat back, but still getting grades for that, and while the guys can play any sport they want, explore anything they like, the girls were just sitting back, and they thought that was a compliment. I mean, wow, we don't have to do anything, we get good grades, and I was like, I want to play too. So in just in that system of education, it highly impacted ourselves outside of school.
It sucks to say this, but that's definitely not an Indonesia thing.
As you were speaking, I was like, can identify.
What I'm also scared of is that these old men are passing that down to their children, to their sons, to their daughters, and where when we can talk to these younger generation as much as we can, but if they're forced upon that notion or that thinking at home so much, drilled in so much in their family, then what are they supposed to do? I mean, the child marriages rates are up. I've had friends in my school's middle school which are pregnant, which became pregnant, but only the girls were dropped out. The guys were still in school and still get to pursue, get a certificate and get a degree. But the girls are just, and then all these rumors start, oh, she got pregnant, she's this, it was just unfair to see all of that. So, I mean, it's a harsh reality.
How much manhood and masculinity is defined by what you're not instead of what you are. I think that so many men base their masculinity or their manhood on everything outside of them instead of what actually is their internal idea of what it means to be good and healthy as a human being and as a male presenting person or a person with a penis, however people identify. I think masculinity, even for people who might not have been born male, who are then looking to take on what is considered to be, masculine traits, we do usually define it as, okay, well, what are you not going to be anymore that is going to make you masculine? Mm-hmm. So I think to truly find what's healthy is to stop looking outward and start actually looking inward, and then what the positive parts that we have within ourselves are what we can share with the world in a positive way.
Healthy masculinity should be defined by the individual. So we've kind of gotten into that a little bit instead of the context of women or other cultural stereotypes. Starts with the relationship to yourself. Do you feel like you identify, King, as with a good relationship, a healthy relationship to your masculinity? And if so, do you have a story of that path of how you got on that road? Because as we've just discussed, it's not necessarily the default.
Yeah, it's I think I'm healthy and healing. I think it's a daily process because we do start with ourselves, but then we also have to realize no matter what it is that we do, it does affect our fellow human beings. So you're going to have to learn to process the information like, oh, well, maybe this was healthy for me to do in my space, you know what I'm saying? But it's not healthy for me to do in everybody's space. Or, maybe it's healthy for me to speak to one person or communicate in this way, but other people have different experiences. So I have to use more words and or describe different things or whatever in a different way so that they can understand or I'm communicating better. And I think that for me, things that I've experienced in my life that have just gotten me to that point. I mean, I would like to think that I was raised with respect for everybody, from my mother and my grandmother, but also I know that there are definitely toxic traits that I picked up growing up because I thought that's what a man was supposed to be, like thinking that, I'm supposed to solve disputes with other men with my hands all the time, and that's not healthy for anybody. I definitely think that I had a time when I would use language that was offensive to other people and I had to get checked on it because I didn't want people using language that was offensive to me. So I had to actually be like, yeah, that's wrong, and actually admit it was wrong and apologize to people that I have wronged and work to do better to understand how to not wrong other people. And that's why I say I think it's a healing process. Like we can start to be healthy, but you have to continue to heal.
Can I jump in on, there's some, I can't explain your relationship to your healthy masculinity or not, but there were a couple of things that I heard that I'm like, that's an indicator. You shared like, I had to learn, I had to understand. And that is the basis of a relationship with self, right? Men don't get to see themselves, often men and women, like we categorize people in such a way that you don't even get a chance to learn yourself as an individual. You learn yourself as a man in this culture, right? And whatever that means, and then having to kind of unlearn that. And as you learn yourself as an individual, we're saying like, oh, I wouldn't want anyone speaking to me that way. Then we start to see other people as individuals and not like that very generalized blanket throw. So when you do have an opportunity to learn yourself yourself, you inherently are learning how to learn individuals and have these interpersonal relationships instead of the kind of like this generalization of men are like this and women are like this, or these people are like this and I am like this because I'm a man versus I'm like this because I've made these decisions about myself, or I've chosen these preferences at this point in time in my life. So yeah, the way you're sharing, I, therefore have a relationship with yourself.
I think also within this culture, we are through generations, we have been taught that men's opinions, men's ideas take precedent over women's thoughts and ideas, right? And I'll also include men that have been prescribed like a connotation of weakness. Like if you're gay or you're trans, then somehow you no longer have man brain or some shit. I don't know how they describe, they make this correlation. But, usually when you watch films, they're about men, so you're getting a wide array of man shit, like what men think, what men do, how they do this, how they do that. Men of all levels of society, from like a coal miner to an investment banker to a performer to this. But you don't see that with women. You also don't see a lot of films where there are no men and it's just women. But you could find a whole lot of films where there's like a woman might have a line like, here's your coffee, and that's it. You know what I mean? So I think that societally, men then also are propped up in the school. We learn about our founding fathers. We learned about man did this, man did that throughout history. You look at, there was a comedian we were just watching, and she was showing like, oh, if you look at paintings of ancient Greece, it's men naming shit and having ideas and doing things. And what do they show? 3 women in the fucking forest, naked, holding a fruit. Like they don't have conversations. They don't name the fruit. They don't, you know what I'm saying? Like
just bear the fruit.
Yeah, basically. So I think a lot of men grow up without realizing that women have diverse thoughts, different perspectives, not just from them, but from other women. You know what I'm saying? Like people always throw blanket categorical statements like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or women do this. And if you're always taught that in every aspect of society, being toxic is pretty fucking easy for a lot of men, because also you're bigged up for that activity with other men. They're like, oh yeah, you told her, whistling at her. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever the situation is, it's still kind of like, oh, that was just man stuff. Like I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I was watching a movie with my son. I was trying to find like a friendly, he likes sports. So I'm trying to find a friendly sports movie for a 2-year-old. And I was watching this movie I remember from when I was a kid. It's called Sandlot.
Oh yeah.
And Sandlot is super popular, like for people from like the 90s. Like it's a famous movie. People still say lines from it. And there's a whole scene in that movie where this one little boy pretends that he's drowning so that the woman lifeguard will give him like mouth to mouth so he can kiss her. And like even in that movie, they were like, it was kind of wrong, but he's a legend now. And we all think he's the greatest. And then when they walk past the thing after he basically sexually assaulted this woman, she's like smiling at him. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm like, damn, I don't want to show this to my 2-year-old no more. Like, this is not okay.
Yep.
But it's like these things are like okay within the society. And I think that it's just like that through all aspects of the culture and the society.
You make me think of, with that, you made me think of something, which is this idea that's a little bit outdated already, but some people still have it, which is how women are supposed to be always, ready to have sex with their husbands, much like if that was supposed to be their duty, right?
Right. Yeah, I do not endorse that.
Not at all. And I think that it's very nice to, because I think this maybe also has to do with, and maybe you found it on clients that you work with, that even today, women, even though nobody has told them that, in a way, women could actually like get that messaging from, around. And sometimes they might even feel bad themselves that they are not able to show up, in that way.
And the funny thing about that, and not funny, haha, but sort of funny, tragic, is that when anybody has this sort of burden of expectation put on on them to be sexual, it usually has an inverse effect on libido and desire, right? So if I believe that my partner expects me to be sexual, it's going to take a lot of the fun out of it, and my libido will likely plummet even further, right? So that sort of expectation that a lot of women are told implicitly and explicitly about can be a huge factor in why they're struggling to find motivation or interest in being sexual with their partner.
Yeah, and that's something that we should keep in mind a lot more often. And I think something that is good to, because even with masculinity, that applies, because then what happens with the way we see masculinity in at least what people tend to call this toxic idea of masculinity, that it's very much spread around the media and society, is that a real man is supposed to be hypersexual and want to have sex all the time. So at the same time, it's not only for women that these things happen, it also happens for men within the gender stereotype that they have been assigned.
Right. I mean, I think, and I love that you put that in air quotes, right? Because there is this sort of expectation that I think a lot of men have for themselves based on their own relationship to masculinity, that they should always want to be sexual because men are quote unquote, sexually virile. And that's a part of what can sometimes be called performative or precarious masculinity, right? If I don't want to have sex, maybe I'm not really as manly as I think I am, is kind of that unconscious dialogue. Whereas women are often told that they shouldn't want to be sexual. They should protect their sexuality, but they're expected to give it to their partner, in sort of those old hegemonic gender roles. So it can be a really frustrating situation for everybody because many women organically feel far more in touch with their sexuality. And many men feel like, I'm not really into it in this moment. And I don't want to feel pressure to be into it to prove that I'm a man. We have this really unruly problem as humans to make a whole bunch of assumptions about everything.
Yeah.
And certainly making assumptions about other people when it comes to sex is not off limits, unfortunately. So people do get fetishized depending on whether they belong to different groups of people and whether they're a part of that group or part of another group outside of that group. So I think there are a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of assumptions that people make about someone's relationship to sex or their libido in general, or the kind of sex that they might like based on how they've understood a particular group or the stories that they've made up or have been told about different groups. So yeah, women who share a certain appearance, for example, might be categorized as women who have higher desire, higher libido, versus women who share a different appearance might be, unfairly categorized as women with low desire or no desire. We see this happen a lot when we talk about things like the Madonna whore complex. And, this is something I've been doing a lot of writing about lately, how women are really bifurcated into, groups of people who are either sort of lovable and desexualized or fuckable and over-sexualized. And so depending again on the assumptions and the ways in which people are socially conditioned, they might have all kinds of misrepresentations about people's relationship to libido and desire.
Can you talk about when you started your first activism measures and what made you start?
Well, for volunteering, I've always thought that I've always wanted to help in from elementary school. When I was in Ukraine, there was a community service points that we had to do. So I think it all started from there, where I could see that even a little kid, can make a difference. And it started by like helping out in garage sales and bake sales and stuff, and up to like helping out in animal shelters. And also in Ukraine, when I was there, we had a big anniversary for the Chernobyl incident. So we raised money for that. But I brought that back home when Women's March Jakarta started. I remember that clearly. Because
and when was that?
The first one happened in 2017. Yeah, 2017. And it wasn't that long after the Women's March in the States.
Yeah,
after he got elected. Yeah. So I think that just was the catalyst for me. And I've always wanted to help home. And I found this amazing women who now become my, colleagues and friends. And we were all fighting for the same thing. And we were all different generations, intersectional, my queer friends, even my male survivors and everything. We were fighting for the same thing because, even though the Women's March happened in the States because of one particular person, but here it turns out that, there was so many things wrong in our constitution and in our, right that women and minorities were not given. So that's when I started helping out even more in like the sexual assault community, harassment community, and I'm the co-director for Hollebeck Jakarta, which is a branch from the States. There's a Hollebeck in the States. I forgot which city it started on. But public harassment in public transportations, we've had researches about that where girls ranging from wearing all niqab and hijab are still getting catcalled with the girls who are wearing short skirts and mini skirts and tank tops. So there's no, just putting that research out there. And also we have rules where women are not allowed to walk home alone after a certain time at night. Also, we're fighting for that, like for workers who are, female workers who gets night shifts and stuff. If they walk home just to go home, then she shouldn't get fined for that, right? So, stuff like that. We've been really dealing with that on top of injustice for like our queer friends, especially our trans peers.
Do you know if there's any movement or efforts to be made to educate the people who need to be educated to get these changes? So, we know it's not about what you're wearing. It's about the education and intention of the person who is willing to assault or catcall or whatever the instance is. Do you know if there's efforts being made to address that in school, to say that is not allowed, that is not permissible, that should not even be a notion in your mind?
Yeah. Well, there's no official movement that are doing that yet. Mainly because every time a movement gets big and wants to push into like governments and schools and the national system, they get stomped back. So like, the activists are not doing anything, but we're constantly being shut down. But that's been on my mind so much lately, because as an activist, you don't want to be an activist for like 24/7. You get burnt out and you get tired of saying the same things. It's not the victim's fault. You're still doing that. But I think I'm so afraid that these movements are creating a circle more like a clique where we keep talking to the same people. Our audience are already woke. The ones that are catcalling me at night are these older men who don't have internet probably, or just watch television. So that's what I want to push forwards to a mainstream view. In televisions, there's still sexist jokes, fat phobia. The women are supposed to be, there are only two types of women when you see Indonesian television. Ones that are funny and ones that are so pretty that she can only be seen as pretty. So it's horrible, but the majority of people that are doing that don't get the same access and resources that we do. That's why I keep, it's worrying that these me and my friends are only talking to the same people. I think that's why we need to probably brainstorm with other activists all over the world how they are doing that, managing that.
When we're only learning through, like in that situation, like let's just say our 2-year-old was like maybe 6, right? Or 7, a little bit more understanding. Being able to narrow in on how does he feel about what he just saw, right? Instead of like, you shouldn't do that to women. That is not good, right? Men shouldn't do that. And so that's like, again, categorically, men shouldn't, women feel. And just being able to break that down and bring it back to the how you understand yourself. It is, how do you feel about what happened to that lady? How do you feel about her being tricked? Would you trick a woman like that? Would you trick anybody? How would you feel if you were tricked? What's another way that he could have got that kiss? How could he have expressed that he really liked her? And then we're allowing this child, which we can do the same activity with any adult. And as adults, we could do this with ourselves. It's like me watching a movie where there's like a damsel in distress and she does this and then down the refrigerator. And I remember breaking up like that with guys because that's the way you, and then I would think like, do I really want to slide down this? Like, what is that going to bring him back? Is he even going to see it? Because where can I post this at when I'm 16? Like we didn't have where you could like do do a subtweet breakup, right? So why was I doing that? It was a learned behavior. But then when I asked myself, how is this going to actually help me process this pain? And I was like, yeah, it's not. Yeah. Okay. Well, what would make me feel better? So then like getting into the self. And I do think that hopefully the listeners are, especially if they're male listeners, can understand, like, you don't have to take this browbeating of like, oh, I got to do what women want or politically correct. Just take a minute and really think about how this feels within you without all of these external influences.
I work with a lot of women, for example, who are currently or who have been engaged in sex work, and they are often wrongly stereotyped as people who have incredibly high libidos. And certainly they can at different points in their lives or different points in the day or with different partners, right? But there's sort of this assumption that because this is their profession, that their libido must be sky high. And so when that isn't true, they often face a lot of frustration from a partner who may have expected them to engage in a frequency of sex that met their fantasy, right? And so when that happens, I really invite people to, one, remember that as humans, we fill in the blanks a lot with all kinds of assumptions that are super faulty. And when you come front and center with an assumption that you've made about someone, whether it's about their sexual desire or anything else, just own it and walk it back. And it's okay to say, oh, I didn't really think about that. And I appreciate you sharing with me that that's not your truth, right? And just reframe, regroup, and challenge yourself. There's growth in that. There's honor in that. And there's freedom in that. Because when you start to realize how you've been misrepresenting people in your minds, you have the ability to find other like-minded folk that maybe fell outside of a smaller group of people than you assumed.
I think I also hear you saying that if you are the person who's on the other side there, who's the person who's being misrepresented or who's being assigned wrong ideas about what their libido is, I think I'm hearing that you're also inviting to communicate that.
Yes.
And I think that's a challenge because I think a lot of people, or we just tend to carry this. And then sometimes because we think that certain things are expected of us, we don't really feel encouraged to talk about them, tell them to our partners.
Yeah. I mean, it can be really challenging when your partner's coming at you with a lot of expectations because of some demographic, status that you possess. And you've got to set those boundaries and let them know what your truth is. But I do invite people to do that when it is safe to do that. And if it doesn't feel safe to do that, to extricate themselves from that situation when they can do so safely. There's a lot of entitlement that comes with sexual desire and libido, and you never have to be sexual when you don't want to be. So you get to set those boundaries when people have an erroneous assumption about you or your desire, or your libido, or your willingness.